The D200 is 20 years old this year, which is nuts in my opinion, because it also makes my camera 20 years old, and it makes me 20 years older than I was when I was even a young adult, so that makes me a little bit old. I think it's interesting, this camera just gained popularity quite a lot lately, and for good reason, because I completely see why. I also really adore this camera. It has a lot of limitations, and I want to dig into those in the coming time. I decided to spend 2 months with this camera as my only everyday camera, so to say. It's not gonna be my only camera because I have to work, and that will be with the cameras of a higher megapixel, but as an everyday camera, this is the one I'm gonna spend 2 months with. I'm not really curious about what my opinion is gonna be, because I probably know it already, but I still gotta take this journey and see what happens. One aspect that makes this camera really popular today is that it mixes both old and new in a way. You can say when you pick up the cameras hasn't really evolved much since. It still feels like a very current camera, and it even feels a lot more robust than some newer cameras. Hold kæft, mand. Jeg skal lige så spørge dig, om jeg ikke må tage et billede. Det må du gøre. Okay. Bare sådan her. Jeg skal have sådan et ansigt op. Du kan tage billeder, så er det sammen.
Er du ikke også TikToker?
Nej.
Og den du er ret sikker på?
Ja, det er helt sikker på, jeg ikke.
Det virker meget bekendt.
Nå, det er jeg ikke. Hvis det giver mig. I still feel like I'm picking up a current camera with some few limitations today. I'm also picking up a camera that offers me something that my newer camera doesn't, in form of some limitations that in return gives a unique sort of Så må jeg kigge den her vej engang. Sorry. Tusind tak. Ja, hey, må jeg tage et billede af dig? Jeg vil lave sådan nogle portrætter, bare sådan noget forårs. Folk i vores. Ja, lige præcis. Okay, fint nok. When you pick this camera up today, it does feel very much like a current camera, or like feels exactly like picking up one of the sort of last DSLRs. It's not really falling behind in this apartment, and it does feel like a very nice body to hold, and it feels super robust, and I know it is because it survived 20 years through all sorts of different environments. But I think it mixes this build quality and the build mentality, so to say, from the newer cameras with tech that is starting to be more and more popular, like CCD sensors and old processing things that maybe slow us down or forces us into a specific some of the aspects that make older cameras popular today, like the CCD sensor cameras. It's more of this restrictions. It both forces you to to use the camera in a specific way, or it frees you from having a lot of different options in posts. So you can't just say I'll fix it in post because you're locked into a certain ISO range, and you also don't have the luxury of having a wide dynamic range, so to say. But you are given a really nice image that is really hard to mimic with the modern CMOS sensors. When it comes to speed of the camera, it's not very fast, but it was speedy back when it was introduced. It has 5 FPS. And a buffer of around 15 shots or something, depending on what quality you're shooting. And that sounds ridiculously low by today's standard, and it is, because with other cameras you can just keep on shooting. I do find though, still buffering, I do find though that that whatever scenario you put this camera in today, it doesn't really matter, because you're shooting it for the image quality and you're probably not shooting in bursts. You're probably choosing this camera because of its unique colors and its unique sort of image quality. And for that, I don't really think anyone is gonna care about speed. But this camera isn't gonna slow you down. I think if you're fresh into photography and you're used to some modern mirrorless cameras, this is super slow. But the camera it replaced, the D100, is even slower. It has 3 FPS, a buffer of 3 images, and a clearing time of 30-40 seconds or something. So compared to that, this is insanely fast, and that also sort of demonstrates how huge a jump from the D100 to the D200 there was back then. But I do think one thing you need to take into consideration if you're buying this camera for as an everyday carry camera, that's the limitations that are naturally put on this camera. Those limitations are nice to some extent, but they're also going to be really drawbacks if this is your only camera. I wouldn't really recommend you to go out and buy this as your only camera, but if you're in the Nikon system already, then it makes perfectly sense to have this as sort of an alternative tool or something. Because I think those 800 ISO, they are limiting in some way. I see so many situations with my family and stuff like that where the camera just is not capable of shooting, where my phone is probably a better choice or something. And it's not because the images look ugly, it's just not really capable at all. So I think if you buy this camera for the look that it produces, that's the reason to buy it. But otherwise, so like Lucy Lumen is saying in her D200 video, I think this is a RAW camera. I never really appreciated the JPEGs coming out of this, but I really love the RAW files. If you learn how to edit this file, you'll get a very unique image out of it. And I think she just stepped on this camera and learned everything there is to know about it in a split second, and that's really cool to see in a way. Well, it's also been my companion through a lot of personal projects and a lot of sort of personal achievements in photography, even though for most of the time it's been an outdated camera, so to say. And it's an outdated camera today, but it's an interesting camera today because it offers something that people are looking for, a unique image, sort of a forced image in a way. Sure, there's a lot of headroom in the RAW files, but they still sort of, to get the most out of this camera, you need to work within its limitations, and that's sort of offering something unique in my opinion. At least when you compare it to modern cameras where you just have insane amount of headroom. But I sort of look at this camera as a film camera, or maybe not as a film camera, but as a film stock, so to say. When I picked this camera, I sort of tapped into the colors that this camera is offering, and I have to work with that to its advantages. So, if you're looking for this camera today, these are the limitations that I think that you should sort of consider before you buy it. First of all, the ISO range up to 800 can be somewhat limiting. At least if this is a camera that you're buying with the intent of only owning this camera, then I think you're locked into this 800 ISO, and that's not a lot when you think about it. It's really hard to do nighttime photography, and sure, it actually goes up to 1600, but that's where the image quality sort of begins to be worse than film, if you know what I mean. When you take 800, that's sort of comparable to a Portra 800 in some way. It's sort of the same resolution you get out of it. But if you go over that, then you're not gaining anything over shooting film. And that's sort of a benchmark that I think counts a lot. So I think if you're buying this camera, you should buy it as a tool. That you choose for specific image quality. It's not an everyday carry, or it can be an everyday carry, but it's a camera that you have to know the limitations of, and you have to work with those limitations. But you don't have a camera for 20 years and it's not gonna fall apart in some way or another. So the things that are sort of starting to fall apart on my camera is, first of all, the LCD is starting to, I don't know, fog up a little bit. I don't really know how to describe it. I only see this in heavy sunlight. It becomes very flat, and the screen is, it's like there's a layer of fog inside of it, and I just have to live with this. And for now, it's not a big problem. I don't see this in dark environments, but I do see it now because it's sort of beginning to get a little bit dark, but it's still not so bright. So that's the first thing. Also, the batteries are starting to show their age. Obviously, you can buy new batteries, but the original series of batteries for this are long out of production. I think this is a minor issue still. I still have 3 working batteries. And I do find that the battery life on all 3 are still workable. So besides the screen getting a little bit foggy with time, also my the thumb command dial is starting to skip once. It's very rare, and it's been very rare for a lot of years actually, but it stops once in a while. And first I thought that this is gonna be the death sentence of this camera, but it's never gotten worse, where my D200 got worse and worse and worse and worse to the point where it wasn't reliable anymore. And also all of my 2 Sony cameras both experience the same thing, and where one actually is completely broken now. So this isn't unique. You see this in every brand that has a command thing. That's something to look for when you buy a new. See if it's starting to skip stops on your shutter dial. It is. Plastic parts on this camera are still okay. I know that from other cameras that are sort of same age that I own, plastic is something to be worried about a little bit, because after many years it will start to get a little bit dry and it cracks a little bit easier than when it's new. And this one has some cracks in the plastic, but it's not to the point where the body feels unreliable or anything like that. One thing that I find limiting though, even after having used this for 20 years, is the lack of dedicated lenses in a way. When it comes to lens selection, you would think that the F-mount is a really rich mount with a lot of options at it, and it is, but I think that at least this is my opinion, that when it comes to the DX format, there aren't really that many options that are that feels tailored with this. You have this one, 70 to 17 to 55 professional zoom lens. That is a wonderful lens, and I think it really pairs with this super nicely, but it is sort of the only one of my lenses in my lens bag that I think really fit. I think when I put it on a 28mm or 24mm, it just becomes a bad 35mm equivalent, where I'm not getting the 35mm qualities out of those lenses. So, and they are also huge compared to what they would be if they were sort of made for DX format. So I think that my conclusion after using this for 2 months is that I really enjoy the raw files, and I really enjoy when I find a project that fits this camera. But I don't enjoy it so much as my personal carry-around camera. I do love the body. I don't think that the files are very nice coming out of the camera without any raw editing. And so it's just it's not. Et billede. Sådan. Ja. Det var det.